All right, all right. Here we go.
One thing.
Yes.
I have a son,
You
Jim.
have, you have two sons.
Yeah.
Jim.
And he is a great guy. He has my, me and my side, he takes us.
Takes care of you.
And I hear a lot of over things. They're all helters there, you know. Not,
Yeah.
he's, when we having things happen, he does it.
Praise the Lord. Yeah. Well, I understand that. You know, then my mother was over here up till recently, and you know, and that was my job to take care of her for the last, oh gosh. Well, my dad passed away in 1978. And I can tell you that not once in her entire life did she ever put gas in her car.
Who was in it?
My mother.
Mother.
My dad did it until he died, and I did it after that, you know. And you know, when she moved over here, she only kept her car maybe a year, and she said, I'm too nervous to drive now, you know. So, didn't have to put gas in her car, but I had to take her to the store, into Brahms, and to the doctor, and to, et cetera, right? You know, but that's just part of the deal, you know. She did hers for many, many years when I was young. You know. Anyway, okay. Mathew chapter 24. We got to set the stage here before we get to the focus of the lesson and the last part, you know, the last 16 verses or whatever. If we go back to the beginning of 24, this is the end of these parables that Jesus has been teaching basically on Tuesday, right? On Sunday, it was Palm Sunday. He comes in to Jerusalem, right? Monday, he chases the money changers, etc., out of the temple. On Tuesday, he's teaching, okay? And including in chapter 23, talking to the Pharisees, and in verse 13, he says, but woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from men. In verse 14, woe to you. Verse 15, woe to you. Verse 16, woe to you. Verse 23, woe to you. Verse 25, woe to you. In 24, he calls them blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Right? In 27, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Verse 29, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, you build tombs, you know, of the prophets and adore the monuments of the righteous and say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been the partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Yeah, you would. In verse 33, you serpents, you brood of vipers, how shall you escape the sentence of hell? Now, what do you think they thought of that?
They probably didn't like it.
Was he pulling any punches at all?
Not at all.
The only thing he didn't do was just send him straight to hell right at that moment. Right?
Just wipe him out, yeah.
It just seems like he knew it was too late for him. And he's rubbing their nose in it. You know.
Well, who's hearing him besides them? All the people in the temple. And what is this? Passover week.
Yeah.
The
It's a
temple
crowded
is
place.
full of people. People from all over Judea, you know, and other places, right? So everybody's hearing him totally chastise the scribes and the Pharisees, right? Preparing the people for what's going to happen next. Letting them know that these guys are not the people to follow.
Do they all have the same language?
Well, if they're in Jerusalem, Jews traveling to Jerusalem, they probably spoke at least the Hebrew, even though Aramaic was really the common language at this time, right? So, and the educated ones all spoke Greek. Alexander saw to that, which is why we have all the New Testament in Greek, which is really neat because Greek is a much more specific language than Hebrew. The message that God gives us through the Greek, makes it much more clear. Example being the word for virgin. In the Hebrew, it just means young, unmarried maiden, and the assumption is you're a virgin if you're a young, unmarried maiden. In the Greek, there's a specific word for a virgin, which is used. Okay? But the point being is he's gone through all of this, right? And now he's leaving the temple, right? And in verse 1, Jesus came out of the temple and was going away with his disciples. When his disciples came up to him out of the temple buildings, and he answered them, "Do you see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here shall be left upon another, which will not be torn down." So Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. Was it destroyed?
Yes.
In 70 AD, the Romans tore it down. And they went through the temple, the walls had been laid with gold, right? So they're taking the stones off, getting the gold out that's between the stones. Taking her down, right? Every stone. He was sitting on the Mount of Olives. Disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" When's this all going to happen? Tell us about the future, right? And Jesus goes on to tell them about the tribulation. "See to it that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will mislead many." How do you know when it's really Jesus that comes back the next time? Everybody in the entire world will see it. You won't need anybody to tell you he's over here. Everybody will see it. It's going to happen. It's a worldwide event. Right? When he comes back the next time to the Mount of Olives and splits the mountain when he lands, right? It's not something anybody's going to have to tell you about. But he goes on to tell you about wars and rumors of wars, kingdom against kingdom, and all these things. And he talks about the birth pangs, right? And so, but then he says, "And when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." When is this going to happen? Anybody remember our Revelation study?
Well,
The abomination.
when the rapture happens,
Well, the rapture is going to happen, and sometime after that, which it was educational to me to realize that it's not immediate, not necessarily immediate. We could have the rapture and then have 20 years before the start of the tribulation. The Bible doesn't really specify. And when you look at how long it's been since Jesus' resurrection, right, and ascension to today, who knows how long that period of time is. But we have the rapture, right? Then sometime after that, probably shortly, but sometime after that, the start of the tribulation period, halfway through that 7-year period is when this happens. And then you move in from the tribulation to the great tribulation, the last 3.5 years, right? So anyway, that's what he's telling them about, right? And they're like, well, trying to understand all of this. Okay? He describes in verse 27 the second coming, just as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. When he comes the second time, right? The chart.
Yeah.
Whenever the corpse is, there will be vultures will gather, but immediately after the tribulation, those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with a power and great glory. Right? And he will send forth his angels, and will, with a great trumpet, they will gather together his elect. Right? How do you become one of his elect?
Accepting.
Accept Christ, exactly. The Christians, right? From the four winds of the earth and the end of the sky to the other. Now learn from the parable of the fig tree, which, when its branches already become tender and put forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. When you see that, you know summer's coming. Even so, you too, when you see all these things, recognize he is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. So when you see all the signs, right, we're within one generation of all these things taking place. Have we seen all the signs? We've seen all the signs that I'm aware of. Have we seen the wars and rumors of war? Have we seen the earthquakes, right? You know, have we seen the Jews return to Jerusalem?
Yep.
You know?
Well, some of them did, you know.
Yeah. They've come from all over the world to Israel, right? And in spite of the world's best efforts to get rid of them, they're still there.
Apparently there's a bunch of them in Russia, because they keep asking for.
Well, there were more, but, you know, the Russians didn't treat them very well, so a lot of them went to Israel. They went to Israel from all over Europe. They've gone from all over the world. You know, Israel's population, you know, people that moved to Israel to become Jews in a Jewish state. Right?
Wasn't it in 45 or 46?
48,
48, yeah.
May 15th,
Yeah.
right? Or 14th, I think. But nonetheless, that's all happening, right? Then he says, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. When God says it, that's it, right? No ifs, ands, or buts. Then into our focus of the lesson, but of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. God, Jesus being totally God and totally human, how does the totally God not know? Did this ever puzzle you?
Well,
Yeah, it's
he's
both.
just not gonna let you know about it.
Just because I don't totally understand the Trinity.
Yeah, well, will we ever totally understand the Trinity? I don't think we'll totally understand it when we're there, right? But in 2 Philippians, thought I had it marked, so I could just flip to it real quick. But I didn't. In 2 Philippians, right? It says in verse 5, have this attitude in yourselves, which also is in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, the same essence, right, did not regard equality with God as a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Jesus decided that he would be a man. So even though he's still God, his You know, we obviously that his deity is hidden in his human form until he decided to let people see it, right, in the transfiguration. And so in that human form, there were some things that were even, you know, because he accepted this obedience, even to death on the cross. Jesus chose to follow this path. And apparently one of the things that happened was there were some things that he didn't know while he was in the human form as a man, because he's 100% man. Apparently, because that's what he said. He said, nor the Son. He himself said, nor the Son. Wasn't somebody else saying it. So we have to accept that for what he said, but somehow that was the case.
As a human.
As a
he
human.
Did not know.
Did not know, right? For the coming of the Son of Man, where does the phrase Son of Man come from? We talked about this several weeks ago. It's his favorite term for himself, right? He's the Son of Man. Well, the Son of Man comes from Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, and it's a reference to the Messiah. So when he says the Son of Man, he's saying the Messiah, right? So the coming of the Messiah will be just like the days of Noah, right? For in those days, which were before the flood, they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. So what were people doing?
Living their own life.
Just living their life, paying no attention. Now, what was Noah doing?
Getting ready.
For 100 years, he's building the ark.
People thought he was crazy.
They probably thought he was crazy, right? What are you doing? I'm building this boat. Why? So I'll be safe. From what? What's to come? They're like, there's no water here.
What's rain? What's rain?
Yeah. They'd never even seen rain before, let alone a flood that would lift an ark as big as the boat he was building, right?
They hadn't seen rain.
Nope. It had never rained prior to the flood.
Everything was watered by dew. That was the first rain upon the earth.
And it was quite a downpour. Yep. And the water, you know, the water's from the heavens and the water's from underneath. So it wasn't just the rain, but also water from underneath the earth came up, you know, and flooded the whole thing. Right? But they were just living their lives, paying no attention. You remember the parable of the vineyard? What were the guys doing? Paid no attention to God whatsoever, right? To the landowner, you know, the vineyard owner. But just said, do whatever we want.
If you add that much water waves, and if there hadn't been any water before, and you add all of that water to the earth, it's going to change its orbit.
Might have.
I mean, you know, it's just because all those things are circling up there because they are depending on speed and their volume and their weight.
Well, I mean, the implication is that the Earth was more like Venus and had this water vapor all around it that kept out all the UV rays that makes people get old and whatnot, and people lived much longer, obviously, right? After the flood, that didn't happen, right? Age of the Earth went down rapidly, okay? And so all that water vapor is now on the ground, you know, and it took a while for it to all just drain back down into the ground, right? Now, the orbit of the Earth, the spin, all that, that's only going to change if God wanted it to change. He's in total and complete control.
On the earth anyway, that rain evaporates the water and it goes up into the cloud and then it returns. It just keeps going back and forth, but it all originates on earth.
Yeah, but the amount of water that the atmosphere holds is drastically less than it did before the flood.
Yeah.
Right? You know, so Point being is that the people were simply living their life the way they wanted to and totally ignoring what's going on. And in the end times, we got the same situation. How long has it been since Jesus was resurrected? And so how many people have said, well, I remember that story, but good grief, if he was going to come back, he'd have come by now. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
You know? But Jesus said he's coming back. Is there any doubt that he's coming back?
No.
No doubt. Right? And what happens to the people who are just living their quote unquote ungodly lives is what 2 Peter says about people that just live their lives with ignoring God. 2 Peter 2:5 says those people are ungodly. They did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the, quote, Son of Man, the Messiah, be. Then there shall be two men in the field. One will be taken, and one will be left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, one will be left. So what he's saying is that they're out in the field doing their thing, their everyday normal routine, not paying any attention, right? But one of them had already paid attention. He's still doing his daily work, but in his heart, right, he had made a change. He had become one of the elect. The other one had not. So one's taken, and of course we see this as a reference to the rapture, right? One will be taken, one will be left. Men and women. Again, a reference to women that you would not have seen in any other writings of that period. Because women were what? Property.
Yeah.
They weren't anything of value, right? Jesus said, I'm taking women too. All they got to do is accept me, right? Become one of the elect. So, therefore, be on the alert. Pay attention, right? For you do not know which day the Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time the night the thief was coming, he would have been alert and would have not allowed his house to be broken into. Right? Does that mean Jesus is a thief?
He's referring, making himself look like a burglar.
You know, all he's saying is, if you knew, you'd pay attention. Because the thief is going to come suddenly, unexpectedly. Well, so shall the Messiah, when he comes, will be suddenly and unexpected. Because no one knows the day or the hour. Now, parable of the fig tree tells you what? We should know the season. You should pay attention to the signs. You should always be on alert. And always be doing the faithful work that Christ has given each of us to do. Right? Because if you're not, right, you're going to be surprised, and this surprise will not be a surprise you're going to like. Right? For this reason, you be ready too, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour which you do not think he will. At the hour you think he won't come, boom, there he is. Right? In 45, then who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? So again, back to the reference, who then? So as a consequence of what I said, in this little parable, he's saying you put a slave in charge of all the others, right? And he's got a job to do. Make sure they all get fed, etc. Blessed is the slave whom this master finds so doing when he comes. What does blessed mean?
Well,
Blessed is the poor in spirit,
yeah.
for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, right? Blessed means happy, but with divine favor. Not just happy. Happy with divine favor, right? And spiritual well-being. If you've got divine favor and spiritual well-being, you should be happy. You should be smiling. You know, the rest of the world's problems are somewhat irrelevant, aren't they? If you keep it in perspective. So these people are blessed. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. What happened to Joseph? Sold into slavery, right? But he did right. And his master put him in charge of his entire household. Same kind of example. So we that are doing right, when Jesus comes and catches us doing the stuff we're supposed to be doing, we're going to have some kind of rewards in heaven. We don't know what they are, right? But there's many references to rewards in heaven for those, of his elect, right? But if that evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time. Remember, the hour when you think not. And shall begin to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards. Now, what was his job?
To take care of
To
it.
take care of, feed the other slaves. He's beating them and feeding other evil men. Eating and drinking with drunkards. He's doing the exact opposite of what he was there given to do, right? Of what his assignment was. Completely the wrong people in his life. The master of that slave will come, just when Jesus comes, on a day when he does not expect, right? Does not expect him, and at an hour which he does not know. Same story. We don't know when Jesus is coming back. And shall do what? Cut him in pieces. I would call that death.
Say that again.
Cut him in pieces. Right? And assign him a place with the hypocrites. Who are the hypocrites? He just told us in chapter 23 about 14 times. Right? The leaders.
Yeah.
Scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Right? And what's going to happen to them? Weeping shall be there and the gnashing of teeth. How many times did Jesus tell people that if you end up in hell, what do you got? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. You're very, very unhappy with who?
This cut him in pieces. My Bible has a note says that means severely scourge him. Not literally cut him up with a sword.
Well, it means you're going to kill him. You're going to die is what's going to happen.
Severely.
Right? Well, and the weeping and gnashing of teeth, that's eternal punishment. Jesus' reference to eternal punishment. So people who ignore God do it at their own peril. They choose to ignore God, and thus they are choosing to go to hell themselves. So when they're in hell, who do they have to blame? Themselves, right? And don't you think it's somewhat appropriate that when you get there, God's made it so you can't blame anybody but yourself. So you have eternity to sit there in punishment blaming yourself. You're not going to get to blame God or anybody else. You chose to reject Christ. Thus, you chose to send yourself to eternal punishment. Your decision. Nobody else's. Nobody else is to blame. God made it apparent to you what you needed to do, and you ignored him.
It's kind of interesting. Some people, I've heard several say, the way I look at it, no matter what you believe, as long as you're sincere, you're okay. That's a common phrase.
Yeah, that's not the way it works, is it? You can be very, very sincere and be sincerely wrong. Right? And it's like that little saying, that this, like, who was it said that? Gosh, I'll think of it in a minute. That this God thing is simply the wrong thing to be wrong about. You're wrong about this.
Yeah.
You have eternal punishment. Not a good deal. Right? Now, we who are of the elect, we are to be doing what God's laid out for us to do. Right? And thus we'll end up with rewards. Okay? If we're doing what God laid out for us to do. I mean, there's probably some variability to that. You know, but anybody who's a Christian is going to heaven. Right? They're going to be with Jesus forever. What our responsibilities and duties and things we'll be doing for him at that point, who knows? We do know that Paul said that we'll be ruling over the angels. So we got quite a position to take once we're there. This whole concept of the church, right, is quite unique in all history. It puts us in a very special situation and position with Christ, right? He calls us brothers. Remember last week? Go tell my brothers. Right? So, now on the other hand, how many of us know people who are currently in the rejection status?
Currently in the rejection.
Status. They're rejected Christ at this point. They're not dead yet. They still have a chance to repent. And are we on our knees enough for them?
I've got a little chart here. If any of you want a copy, I took it out of a book that I took a course on Revelation, and that was a textbook, but it has the flow chart. Take you one and send it on down if you want one.
Any questions or comments? I know we've had second bell. On the focal point of this lesson in chapter 24, right? I like I've said before, ever since I read the late great Planet Earth, I felt like that Jesus was coming back in my lifetime. And that was what, 1972?
Yeah,
Right?
everybody thought that, I think.
You know, but you still got to admit, there's a whole lot of very smart people who thought he was coming back in their lifetime, going all the way back to the Apostle Paul. Right? So I could easily be wrong, but Jesus tells us we should know the season. Parable of the fig tree tells us to know the season, and most Bible scholars tell you that the fig tree is Israel. When you see Israel, you're now in the season. Now, how long it is for the generation, it could be as many as 120 years, right? Genesis 5, a generation shall be 120 years. Right?
Not many make it anymore, but
Yeah. So I don't know exactly when he's coming back, which only makes sense since he says nobody else knows either. The angels don't know.
he said
Right.
he doesn't even know.
He didn't then, he does now.
Yeah. When he was on earth, he didn't know.
Yeah, once he was resurrected, he had it all. All power had been given to him, right? In heaven and on earth.
Enough of the signs that are present and have been that we shouldn't be surprised if it happened today.
Could happen today. We should be on the alert. So we should be making sure that we're doing what we're doing every day is in alignment as if he was coming back today. If we expected him today, how would you act differently?
If you what?
If you expected him today, how would you act differently?
Well, having worn a coat, it was a little chilly, going up.
Wear a coat. Put my coat on. Get ready to go. Yeah. Well, something like that. All right. Well, terrific lesson in my opinion.
Yep.